I stood at the bank ATM, my hands trembling, as I stared at the screen showing zero balance in my college fund. $39,000 had vanished overnight. 4 years of part-time jobs, saving every penny, and my grandparents' contributions gone. When I confronted my parents, Dad couldn't meet my eyes, while Mom declared they'd given everything to my brother Marcus to cover his gambling debts. "Family comes first," she said coldly. "Charleston needs it more than you do." My entire engineering degree hung in the balance with just 1 semester left. Everything I'd worked for was crumbling. I burst through the front door of our suburban Cleveland home, my mind racing with disbelief and fury. The familiar scent of Mom's lavender candles felt suffocating now, and the family photos lining the hallway seemed to mock me with their smiling faces. Marcus sprawled across our leather sectional sofa, his feet propped up on the coffee table, scrolling through his phone without a care in the world. He didn't even glance up when I stormed in. "How could you do this to me?" I demanded, my voice cracking with emotion. "That money was for my final semester at Case Western. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel with mechanical precision. Her graying hair was pulled back in its usual tight bun, and her lips formed that thin line I knew meant she'd already made up her mind about something. Dad shuffled behind her, his shoulders slumped in defeat, refusing to make eye contact. "Sit down, Charleston," Mom said firmly. "We need to discuss this like adults." "Discuss what?" I shot back. "How you stole my entire future without even asking me." Marcus finally looked up from his phone, a smirk playing across his features. At 28, my older brother had never held a steady job for more than 6 months. His dark hair was disheveled, and he wore the same wrinkled Giants jersey he'd had on for 3 days straight. "Relax, little brother. It's not like the world's ending." "And not like the world's ending?" I couldn't believe his casual attitude. "Marcus, that was 4 years of my life. 4 years of working 30 hours a week while maintaining a 3.8 GPA. 4 years of saying no to parties, spring break trips, and everything else college students do because I was focused on building my future." Dad finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Son, we didn't have a choice. Marcus got himself into some serious trouble." Mom nodded grimly. "Your brother owes $37,000 to some very dangerous people. They've been calling the house, driving by our neighborhood, and following your father to work. These aren't the kind of people you ignore or negotiate with." "What kind of people?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Marcus shifted uncomfortably for the first time. "I got in deep with some sports betting. Started small, just a few games here and there. But then I had this system, this foolproof method for picking winners. Except it wasn't foolproof. He borrowed money from loan sharks." Dad explained, his hands shaking slightly. "The interest compounds weekly. What started as $15,000 has grown to $37,000 in just 4 months. I sank into the armchair across from them, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. "So you decided to destroy my life to fix his mistakes." "We didn't destroy anything," Mom snapped. "You're young and intelligent. You can take out student loans like millions of other students do. You'll figure it out." "Student loans?" I laughed bitterly. "Mom, I'm 22 years old and 1 semester away from graduating with 0 debt. Do you understand how rare that is? I was going to start my career with a clean slate, ready to build something meaningful. And Marcus was going to end up in the hospital, or worse," she replied coldly. "These people don't just threaten, they follow through. Would you rather have your brother beaten within an inch of his life or take on some manageable student debt?" The way she framed it made me feel selfish for even questioning their decision. But something didn't sit right with me. Why my money specifically? Why not take out a loan against the house? Why not ask relatives for help? Dad and Mom exchanged a quick glance that didn't go unnoticed. "Your account had exactly what we needed," Dad said. "It was the most accessible option." The most accessible option, I repeated slowly. You mean the easiest to steal. We're your parents, Mom said sharply. We don't steal from our children. We make difficult decisions to protect our family. Marcus needed that money immediately, and you have other options. Marcus had the audacity to nod in agreement. Besides, you're the smart one, remember? You'll land some high-paying engineering job and pay off loans in a few years. I don't have those kinds of prospects. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My own family saw me as the reliable one who could handle any setback, while Marcus was viewed as fragile and needing protection from his own poor choices. They'd sacrificed my carefully planned future to enable his continued irresponsibility. So what happens now? I asked, fighting back tears of frustration and betrayal. Now you apply for emergency student loans? Mom said matter-of-factly. You talk to your financial aid office. You explore your options. And you remember that family takes care of family even when it's difficult. And Marcus, what's to stop him from gambling away more money and creating this same crisis again in 6 months? Marcus shrugged. I learned my lesson. This scared me straight. But his eyes told a different story. There was no real remorse there, no genuine understanding of the magnitude of what his actions had cost me. He'd learned that his family would bail him out, no matter how badly he messed up, which was exactly the wrong lesson. As I sat there processing the complete upending of my life plans, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. My parents hadn't just taken my money, they'd revealed who they really were. When forced to choose between enabling Marcus's destructive behavior and protecting my responsible planning, they'd chosen enabling without hesitation. The son who'd made good choices meant less to them than the son who'd made catastrophic ones. The next morning, I sat in the financial aid office at Case Western Reserve University, staring across the desk at Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd been helping students navigate money problems for 15 years. Her office walls displayed certificates and thank you letters from grateful graduates, but her expression told me she'd heard stories like mine before. Charleston. I have to be honest with you, she said gently, reviewing my file on her computer screen. Emergency student loans require extensive documentation, and since you're listed as a dependent on your parents' tax returns, we need their financial information and signatures for any substantial borrowing. My heart sank. What if they refuse to cooperate? Then your options become extremely limited. You could petition for independent status, but that process takes months and requires proof of circumstances like abandonment or abuse. Financial disagreements typically don't qualify. I slumped in my chair, feeling the walls closing in around me. So I'm trapped. Not necessarily. You could defer graduation for a year, establish independent status, and reapply for aid. Or you could work full-time to save money and complete your degree part-time. Neither option felt acceptable. Deferring meant watching my classmates graduate without me, and risking that I'd never return to finish. Working full-time would stretch my final semester into 2 or 3 years, assuming I could even maintain the focus needed for my challenging engineering coursework. After leaving the financial aid office, I drove to my Uncle Robert's house in Lakewood, hoping family might offer some support that my parents clearly wouldn't. Uncle Robert had always been successful in his accounting practice, and Aunt Susan worked as a nurse practitioner. If anyone could help, it would be them. I found Uncle Robert working in his garage, organizing tools with the same methodical precision he brought to his financial work. His face brightened when he saw me, but his expression quickly shifted to concern when he noticed my distressed demeanor. "Charleston, you look terrible. What's going on?" I explained the entire situation, from discovering my empty account to my parents' justification for their actions. Uncle Robert listened quietly, his jaw tightening with each detail. "I hate to ask," I concluded, "but I was wondering if you might consider lending me money for this final semester. I'll sign any documents you want, set up a payment plan, whatever you need." Uncle Robert's face fell, and I knew the answer before he spoke. "Son, I wish I could help, But your parents already came to us 3 months ago asking for money. They said you were having trouble with tuition and needed emergency assistance." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. They what? They borrowed $8,000 from us, claiming it was for your education expenses. Susan and I were happy to help our nephew succeed. We thought we were investing in your future. Aunt Susan appeared in the garage doorway, having overheard our conversation. Her usual warm smile was replaced by a look of growing realization and anger. "Charleston, are you telling us that money didn't go to your education?" "I never saw a penny of it," I confirmed. "This is the first I'm hearing about any loan from you." Uncle Robert sat heavily on his workbench stool. "They used us. They lied directly to our faces and used our love for you to manipulate money out of us." "We can't lend you more money right now," Aunt Susan said sadly. "We're still paying off some medical bills from Robert's surgery last year, and we trusted that $8,000 was going to a good cause. But this changes everything. I felt terrible for involving them in my family's dysfunction. They'd been deceived just as badly as I had, and now they were out $8,000 with nothing to show for it." My next stop was Grandma Eleanor's assisted living facility in Shaker Heights. At 86, she remained sharp and independent, living in a beautiful apartment filled with photos of her grandchildren's achievements. She'd always been proud of my academic success and had contributed several $1,000s to my college fund over the years. "Grandma, I need to tell you something difficult." I began settling into the chair across from her favorite reading spot by the window. She listened intently as I recounted the entire story, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the facility's garden. "Your parents told me they needed additional money for your final semester," she said finally. "They said your engineering program had unexpected lab fees and that your part-time job wasn't covering everything. I gave them $4,000 just last month." Another lie. Another theft. My parents had systematically deceived everyone who cared about me, stealing money intended for my education to fund their own priorities. The scope of their deception was becoming clear, and it was far worse than I'd initially realized. "I don't have more to give you right now," Grandma Eleanor continued, "but I'm going to have some serious conversations with your parents about where that money really went." That evening, I met my girlfriend Sarah at our usual coffee shop near campus. We'd been dating for 2 years, and she'd been incredibly supportive throughout my academic journey. Her blonde hair caught the warm light from the shop's pendant lamps as she listened to my explanation of the crisis. "This is unbelievable," she said, reaching across the small wooden table to squeeze my hand. "Your own family stealing from you like this." "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "Every option seems to involve either giving up on graduation or going into massive debt." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then brightened. "What if you deferred for just 1 year? You could work full-time, save money, and come back stronger than ever. Lots of students take gap years. But that means watching you graduate without me. It means starting my career a year later than planned." "A year isn't that long in the grand scheme of things," she said encouragingly. "And think about it, you'd have work experience under your belt when you do graduate. Employers value that." Her optimism was infectious, and for the first time since discovering my empty account, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe this wasn't the end of the world. Maybe I could find a way to turn this setback into something positive. The next morning, I drove to the engineering firm where I'd been working part-time for the past 18 months. Bradley Engineering had been the perfect job, flexible hours, relevant experience, and decent pay that had contributed significantly to my college fund. I hoped to speak with Mr. Thomas Bradley about increasing my hours, or possibly working full-time while finishing school part-time. But when I walked into the office, the receptionist looked confused. "Charleston? What are you doing here? I thought you'd quit." "Quit? I never quit. I was just here last week." She pulled up something on her computer screen. "According to our records, you called last Friday and gave your 2 weeks' notice. Said you no longer needed the income and wanted to focus entirely on your studies." My blood ran cold. "Who did you speak to?" "Well, the person said they were you. The voice was different than usual, but people sound different over the phone sometimes. I asked to speak with Mr. Bradley immediately. His office door was open, and he looked genuinely surprised to see me. Charleston? I thought we'd said our goodbyes. Your brother called to confirm that you were definitely leaving and wouldn't be returning. My brother called. Yes, he said he was calling on your behalf because you were too emotional about leaving to call yourself. He thanked us for the opportunity and said you'd learned a lot here. The betrayal hit me like a physical force. Marcus hadn't just stolen my money, he'd sabotaged my employment to ensure I couldn't rebuild my college fund. He'd actively prevented me from recovering from the damage he and my parents had caused. Mr. Bradley saw the shock and anger on my face. Charleston, what's really going on here? I explained the entire situation, including Marcus's apparent effort to eliminate my income source. Mr. Bradley listened with growing concern and anger. That's absolutely unacceptable, he said firmly. Family doesn't sabotage family like that. I'm sorry, but we've already hired someone else to fill your position. However, let me make some calls. I know other firms that might have openings. As I drove home that evening, the full scope of my family's betrayal became crystal clear. They hadn't just taken my college fund, they'd systematically eliminated my ability to recover from their theft. Every potential source of help had been compromised by their lies and manipulation. I was trapped in a situation entirely of their making, with no clear path forward. But something else was becoming clear too. My family's actions weren't just desperate responses to Marcus's gambling crisis. They were calculated moves designed to ensure I couldn't interfere with their plans or hold them accountable for their choices. They'd turned me into a victim of their own making, and they expected me to accept it quietly because family comes first. That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I made a decision that would change everything. If my family wanted to treat me like an enemy, then maybe it was time to stop acting like their victim. 3 days later, I walked into First National Bank with a heavy heart and a single purpose: to close my violated college savings account permanently. The marble floors echoed with each step as I approached the customer service counter, past the leather chairs where customers waited for appointments, and the glass-walled offices where loan officers discussed mortgages and business financing. The young teller, a woman named Jennifer with kind eyes and a professional smile, pulled up my account information. You'd like to close your savings account ending in 7492? Yes, I said simply. There's nothing left in it anyway. As Jennifer began the closure process, I noticed movement in my peripheral vision. Patricia Williams, the bank manager I'd met once when opening the account, approached with a concerned expression. She was a woman in her mid-50s, with silver hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent decades helping people navigate financial crises. Charleston Thompson, she asked softly. Could I speak with you privately for a moment? Something in her tone made my stomach clench. I followed her to her corner office, which overlooked the busy intersection of Euclid and East 9th Street. Her desk was organized with military precision, and the walls displayed her business degree from Ohio State and various banking certifications. Please have a seat, she said, closing the door behind us. I've been hoping you'd come in. There are some things about your account that have been bothering me for weeks. What kind of things? Patricia settled behind her desk and pulled up something on her computer. 3 weeks ago, there was a large withdrawal from your account, $39,217.43. That represented the complete balance, which is unusual for someone your age who's been such a consistent saver. I nodded grimly. My parents took it without my permission. That's what I suspected, she said, her expression growing more serious. I actually tried calling you several times after the withdrawal was processed, but someone else answered your phone each time. Someone else? Yes, a man who claimed to be you. He confirmed that the withdrawal was legitimate and that he'd authorized his family members to access the account. But something felt wrong about the entire interaction. The voice was different, older, and the person seemed evasive when I asked standard verification questions. My hands began to tremble slightly. What kind of verification questions? Patricia consulted her notes. Basic account details that any account holder would know immediately: your social security number, your mother's maiden name, the date you opened the account. The person answering had to pause and seemed to be checking information rather than recalling it naturally. That wasn't me, I said firmly. I never spoke to anyone from the bank, and I certainly never authorized my family to access my account. Patricia nodded knowingly. I had a feeling that was the case. Charleston, I need to show you something, but I want you to prepare yourself. What I'm about to reveal might be disturbing. She turned her computer monitor toward me and pulled up security footage from 3 weeks earlier. The timestamp showed 2:15 p.m. on a Tuesday a day when I'd been attending my thermodynamics lab at Case Western. This is footage from our main floor during the time of your withdrawal, Patricia explained, starting the video. I watched as 3 familiar figures entered the bank's main floor. Dad walked nervously toward the teller windows, his hands fidgeting with a folder of documents. Behind him strode Marcus, with the confident swagger of someone who belonged there. But what shocked me most was seeing Mom calmly taking a seat in the waiting area, her purse in her lap, watching the entire proceedings with the patience of someone supervising an expected transaction. Keep watching, Patricia said grimly. The footage showed Marcus approaching the teller with Dad trailing behind. Marcus handed over documents while Dad provided what appeared to be identification. The teller processed their request, occasionally asking questions that Marcus answered while consulting papers from his folder. Meanwhile, Mom sat serenely in her chair, occasionally checking her watch, but showing no signs of stress or urgency. Your brother forged your signature on the withdrawal forms, Patricia explained. He practiced it well. The signature was close enough to pass casual inspection, especially since your father provided supporting identification showing the same last name. I felt sick watching my family commit what amounted to organized fraud against me. This wasn't a desperate last-minute decision made under pressure. They'd planned this carefully assigned roles and executed their theft with calculated precision. Why didn't you stop them? I asked. Patricia sighed heavily. Unfortunately, all their documentation appeared legitimate on the surface. Your father's identification established family connection, the signatures looked authentic under normal scrutiny, and when we called the phone number on file, someone confirmed authorization. We had no legal grounds to refuse the transaction. But you suspected something was wrong. Absolutely. In 23 years of banking, you develop instincts about these situations. The whole thing felt orchestrated. Your father seemed nervous and guilty. Your brother was overly confident for someone handling another person's money. And your mother's presence suggested family involvement rather than individual emergency. Patricia pulled up another screen showing call logs. After they left, I tried reaching you multiple times over several days. Each time the same person answered, presumably your brother, and insisted everything was fine. But his evasiveness convinced me that fraud had occurred. The scope of my family's deception was staggering. They'd not only stolen my money, but had also impersonated me to cover their tracks, lying to bank officials, and destroying any chance I had of learning about the theft quickly enough to prevent it. What can I do about this? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. You have several options, Patricia said, leaning forward earnestly. This is clearly bank fraud, identity theft, and forgery, all serious federal crimes. You could file a police report and pursue criminal charges. The bank would cooperate fully with any investigation. And if I wanted to recover the money, criminal charges often include restitution requirements, meaning your family would be legally obligated to repay the stolen funds. Additionally, you could pursue civil action for damages and interest. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a spark of hope mixed with righteous anger. My family had committed serious crimes against me, and they could face real consequences for their actions. They'd treated me like a victim who would accept their abuse quietly, but they'd made a crucial error. They'd left evidence. Patricia continued, I've prepared copies of all relevant documentation, including the security footage forged withdrawal forms and call logs showing the deception. Everything is date-stamped and authenticated according to banking regulations. She handed me a thick manila envelope. Charleston, I want you to understand something important. What your family did wasn't just wrong, it was criminal. People go to prison for exactly these types of actions. You don't have to accept this treatment just because they're your relatives. As I sat there holding the evidence of my family's betrayal, something fundamental shifted inside me. They'd gambled that I would be too loyal, too guilty, or too naive to fight back against their theft and deception. They'd counted on my love for them to protect them from the consequences of their crimes. But they'd miscalculated. By documenting their fraud so thoroughly and involving innocent third parties like Patricia and Uncle Robert in their web of lies, they'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. This wasn't a family disagreement anymore, it was a criminal matter with clear victims and perpetrators. Thank you, I told Patricia sincerely. You may have just saved my future. I hope so, she replied warmly. You've been one of our most responsible young customers, and watching your family steal your dreams broke my heart. Someone needed to stand up for you, even if your own parents wouldn't. Walking out of the bank with the evidence folder felt like emerging from a dark tunnel into sunlight. For weeks, I'd felt powerless and victimized, accepting my family's narrative that I should sacrifice my future for Marcus's mistakes. But Patricia had shown me the truth. My family were criminals who'd stolen from me, lied about their actions, and expected to face no consequences. They'd made one critical error in their planning. They'd assumed I would never discover the evidence of their crimes, never fight back against their theft, and never hold them accountable for their actions. They'd treated me like a naive victim who would accept any explanation and any abuse because family loyalty demanded it. But family loyalty was supposed to work both ways, and since they'd shown me none, I no longer owed them any. I drove straight from the bank to the law office of Rogers & Associates, a firm I'd found through online research that specialized in financial crimes and family law. The receptionist scheduled an immediate consultation when I mentioned bank fraud and identity theft, understanding the urgency of such cases. David Rogers turned out to be a sharp-eyed attorney in his early 40s with the focused intensity of someone who'd prosecuted white-collar criminals before entering private practice. His office walls displayed law degrees from Case Western Reserve University and various awards for criminal justice advocacy. When I spread Patricia's evidence across his conference table, his expression grew increasingly serious. Charleston, this is a textbook case of conspiracy to commit bank fraud, he said after reviewing the security footage and forged documents. Your family didn't just steal from you, they planned and executed multiple federal crimes with clear premeditation. What kind of consequences are we talking about? David pulled out a legal reference book and flipped to a marked section. Bank fraud involving amounts over $5,000 carries potential prison sentences of up to 30 years and fines up to $1 million. Identity theft adds additional years and penalties. Conspiracy charges mean each participant faces the same maximum penalties, regardless of their specific role. The numbers were staggering. My parents and Marcus could face decades in prison for what they'd done to me. Part of me felt a savage satisfaction imagining them in orange jumpsuits, but another part recoiled at the thought of destroying their lives so completely. What about restitution? I asked. Federal criminal cases typically include mandatory restitution orders, David explained. The court would require your family to repay not just the stolen amount, but also interest penalties and your legal costs. They'd also likely face civil forfeiture of assets to ensure payment. Could I recover enough to finish my education? Almost certainly. And if they can't pay immediately, the court would garnish wages, seize assets, and place liens on property until the debt is satisfied. You'd have multiple collection mechanisms at your disposal. David leaned back in his chair, studying my face carefully. The question is whether you're prepared for the emotional consequences of pursuing criminal charges against your family. This isn't something you can undo once the legal process begins. I thought about Marcus lounging on the couch without remorse, Mom coldly prioritizing his needs over my future, and Dad's refusal to even acknowledge the magnitude of their betrayal. They'd shown me no mercy when destroying my dreams, and they'd actively worked to prevent my recovery from their theft. They made their choices, I said firmly. Now they can live with the consequences. David nodded approvingly. That's the right attitude. Criminals don't get special treatment just because they're related to their victims. Let me prepare the necessary paperwork to file criminal complaints with both local and federal authorities. That evening, I decided to confront my family one final time before involving law enforcement. I wanted to give them an opportunity to confess their crimes and make restitution voluntarily, though I suspected they'd refuse. More importantly, I wanted to see their faces when they realized their victim was fighting back. I found them in the living room watching television, the picture of domestic normalcy, except for the criminal conspiracy they'd perpetrated against me. Mom sat in her favorite armchair working on a crossword puzzle. Dad occupied his usual spot on the couch, and Marcus sprawled across the recliner, scrolling through social media on his phone. "We need to talk," I announced, standing in the doorway with David's folder of legal documents. Mom looked up with mild irritation. "Charleston, we've already discussed this situation. Nothing has changed." "Actually, everything has changed," I said, pulling out the bank security footage screenshots. "I know exactly what you did, how you did it, and I have proof of every crime you committed." The photographs landed on the coffee table like grenades. Dad's face drained of color as he recognized himself in the bank footage. Marcus sat up straighter, his cocky demeanor evaporating. Mom maintained her composure, but I caught a flicker of fear in her eyes. Bank fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, elder fraud. Those are federal crimes carrying decades in prison. I continued. "Did you really think I'd never find out? Did you assume I'd just accept your theft and move on?" Dad's hands began shaking as he picked up one of the photographs. "Son, we can explain." "Explain what? How you forged my signature? How Marcus impersonated me on the phone? How Mom sat there supervising the whole criminal enterprise like a crime boss?" Marcus finally found his voice. "Charleston, come on. We're family. You can't seriously be thinking about involving the police. You should have thought about that before you stole my entire future," I shot back. "You made a calculated decision to commit serious felonies against me. Now you get to experience the consequences." Mom stood up, her crossword puzzle falling to the floor. "You ungrateful little brat. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. By threatening your own parents with prison. After everything you've done for me." I laughed bitterly. "You mean like raising me to be responsible and hardworking so you'd have someone to steal from when your golden child screwed up? Like teaching me family loyalty so I'd be too guilty to fight back when you betrayed me?" "We protected Marcus from dangerous people," she insisted. "Those loan sharks would have seriously hurt him." "What loan sharks?" I demanded. "I want names, phone numbers, evidence of these threats you keep talking about." The silence stretched uncomfortably as my family exchanged nervous glances. Dad cleared his throat. They were very discreet, underground types who don't leave paper trails." "Convenient," I said sarcastically. "Very convenient that these dangerous criminals who supposedly threatened our entire family left no evidence of their existence." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Look, the situation was complicated. There were people involved who—" "Stop lying," I exploded. "Just once in this entire disaster, try telling the truth." The force of my anger seemed to break something in Dad. His shoulders slumped, and when he looked up at me, his eyes were filled with guilt and defeat. "There were no loan sharks," he whispered. Mom whirled on him. "Robert, shut up." "There were no dangerous people," he continued, ignoring her warning. "No threats, no collectors, no imminent danger to Marcus or anyone else." The confession hit the room like a bomb. Marcus stared at Dad in shock, while Mom's face contorted with fury at being exposed. I felt vindicated, but also sickened by the scope of their deception. "Then where did my money go?" I asked quietly. Dad's voice broke as he answered. "We used most of it to buy your Aunt Diane a new Lexus for her birthday. She'd been driving that old Honda for 10 years, and we wanted to surprise her with something nice. We also renovated the kitchen with the granite countertops your mother had been wanting for 3 years. And Marcus, we gave him $8,000 to keep quiet about what we were really doing. He knew we weren't paying any gambling debts, but we convinced him to go along with the story so you wouldn't know we'd spent your college money on ourselves." The betrayal was even worse than I'd imagined. They hadn't stolen my future to protect Marcus from criminals. They'd stolen it to buy luxury items for themselves and other family members. Every tear I'd shed over Marcus's supposed gambling crisis, every moment of guilt I'd felt for resenting their difficult decision, had been based on complete lies. Mom looked like a cornered animal. "We have every right to that money. We're your parents. Everything you have came from us originally." "Actually, most of it came from my part-time jobs and Grandma Eleanor's contributions," I corrected. "But even if you were right, that doesn't give you the legal authority to commit bank fraud and identity theft." "So what happens now?" Marcus asked weakly. I looked around at the 3 people who'd taught me about love, loyalty, and family values, then systematically violated every principle they'd claimed to cherish. They'd gambled that I would accept any abuse, rather than fight back against my own relatives. They'd calculated that family guilt would protect them from accountability. They'd calculated wrong. "Now you're going to experience what happens when crimes have consequences," I said, heading for the door. "You destroyed my trust, stole my future, and lied about your motives. I'm filing criminal charges tomorrow morning, and I'm going to make sure you face the full legal penalties for what you've done." "Charleston, wait," Dad called desperately. "We can make this right. We can pay you back." I paused in the doorway. "You had weeks to make this right. Instead, you doubled down on your lies and expected me to accept your theft. Some betrayals can't be undone just because you finally got caught." As I walked to my car, I heard Mom screaming at Dad for confessing and Marcus pleading for someone to explain what would happen next. Their panic and fear felt like justice beginning to take shape. For the first time since discovering my empty bank account, I felt like I had power in this situation, rather than just being a victim of other people's choices. They'd taught me an important lesson about family loyalty. It only works when it goes both ways. And since they'd shown me none, they deserved none in return. I packed my belongings that same night, loading everything I owned into my Honda Civic under the cover of darkness. My childhood bedroom with its academic achievement awards and engineering textbooks felt like a museum of someone else's life. The family photos scattered throughout the house seemed to mock me with their images of unity and love that had proven to be illusions. By morning, I was staying in the basement guest room of my best friend Jake's family home in University Heights. Jake's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, had welcomed me without hesitation when I'd called them in tears at midnight, explaining the situation in broad strokes. Mrs. Patterson made up the bed with fresh sheets and insisted I stay as long as necessary to get back on my feet. "Family is supposed to build you up, not tear you down," Mr. Patterson said over breakfast, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug. He'd worked construction for 30 years and understood the value of honest labor. "What your parents did is beyond wrong, it's criminal." Their kindness felt overwhelming after weeks of my own family's betrayal and manipulation. Jake had been my roommate during freshman year before I'd moved back home to save money, and his parents had always treated me like a second son. Now they were proving more loyal than my actual relatives. That afternoon, I visited my high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Henderson, hoping she might have connections or resources I hadn't considered. Her office remained exactly as I remembered: motivational posters covering the walls, college brochures organized in neat racks, and her desk cluttered with forms and applications for students chasing their dreams. Mrs. Henderson had guided me through the college application process 4 years earlier and had stayed in touch throughout my academic journey. She listened intently as I explained the catastrophe that had befallen my education plans, her expression growing more concerned and angry with each detail. Charleston, this is absolutely heartbreaking, she said when I finished. You were one of my most dedicated students, and watching you achieve your goals has been one of the highlights of my career. The fact that your own family would sabotage your success is unconscionable. I don't know what to do about school, I admitted. Even with the legal case, recovering my money could take months or years. Mrs. Henderson pulled out a thick binder labeled Emergency Scholarships and Grants. There are funds specifically designed for students facing unexpected family crises. The Northeastern Ohio Education Foundation has an emergency grant program for students who've experienced sudden financial hardship due to circumstances beyond their control. She flipped through pages of applications and requirements. The Maxwell Family Emergency Scholarship provides up to $15,000 for students within 6 months of graduation who face unexpected obstacles. Your situation would definitely qualify. $15,000 would cover most of my remaining expenses, I said, feeling hope for the first time in days. And I have another idea. Mrs. Henderson continued, reaching for her phone. There's a local business owner who's been looking for engineering talent. Thomas Bradley runs Bradley Engineering. They do structural consulting for construction projects throughout Northeast Ohio. He's mentioned wanting to support promising students with internships and educational assistance. She dialed a number and spoke briefly with someone on the other end. Mr. Bradley, this is Janet Henderson from Lincoln High School. I have an exceptional young man I'd like you to meet. Yes, engineering student at Case Western. Unusual circumstances requiring immediate assistance. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in the conference room at Bradley Engineering facing a man whose reputation for integrity and community involvement preceded him. Thomas Bradley was in his early 60s with graying hair and the confident bearing of someone who'd built a successful business through decades of hard work. His office walls displayed engineering certifications, community service awards, and photos from various charity events he'd sponsored. Mrs. Henderson tells me you're facing a family crisis that's threatening your education, he said, directly studying me with intelligent eyes. I explained my situation completely, including the criminal charges I plan to file against my parents and brother. Mr. Bradley listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes and asking clarifying questions about my academic progress and career goals. Your story is appalling, he said finally. But what impresses me is how you're handling this crisis. Instead of wallowing in victimhood, you're fighting back and taking control of your future. That shows character. Thank you, sir. I have a proposition for you, Mr. Bradley continued. Bradley Engineering has been expanding rapidly, and we need talented young engineers who can grow with the company. I'm prepared to offer you a paid internship with full tuition assistance for your final semester. The offer was beyond anything I dared to hope for. What would the position involve? Initially, you'd work 20 hours per week on structural analysis projects while completing your degree. After graduation, we'd transition you to full-time with a competitive salary and benefits package. The company would handle your tuition payments directly to Case Western, ensuring your education continues without interruption. Mr. Bradley, I don't know what to say. He smiled warmly. Say you'll work hard and make the most of this opportunity. Consider it an investment in talent that might otherwise be lost due to family dysfunction. As I drove back to Jake's house that evening, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. The caller ID showed it was from Grandma Eleanor's assisted living facility. Charleston, thank goodness I reached you. Grandma Eleanor's voice was shaky with emotion. I've been trying to call your parents all day, but they're not answering. I need to see you immediately. What's wrong, Grandma? I can't discuss it over the phone. Can you come here tonight? It's about the money I gave your parents for your education. I arrived at Shaker Heights Senior Living an hour later to find Grandma Eleanor pacing in her apartment with an agitation I'd never seen before. Her usually perfect silver hair was disheveled, and her hands shook as she gestured toward a pile of documents scattered across her dining table. Sit down, Charleston. What I'm about to tell you is going to shock you. She handed me a bank statement showing regular withdrawals over several months, each labeled Educational Expenses for Charleston Thompson. The amounts were staggering: $2,000 here, $3,000 there, totaling over $22,000 in just the past year. Grandma, I never saw any of this money, I said softly. I know that now, she replied, tears forming in her eyes. Your parents have been lying to me for over a year, claiming you needed money for various school-related expenses. Lab fees, textbook costs, emergency car repairs, even medical procedures. She pulled out a folder thick with papers. They gave me detailed stories about each expense, complete with fake invoices and doctored bills. I believed them completely because they were helping my grandson achieve his dreams. The scope of my family's deception was becoming truly criminal. They hadn't just stolen from me, they'd been systematically defrauding an elderly woman by exploiting her love for her grandchild. Grandma, this is elder fraud. It's a serious crime with severe penalties. I understand that now, she said firmly. But there's something else you need to know. I've been keeping careful records of every transaction, every story they told me, and every fake document they provided. I may be 86 years old, but I'm not stupid. She opened a manila envelope and spread its contents across the table. Inside were photographs of the fake invoices, copies of text messages requesting money, and a detailed timeline of every interaction with my parents over the past 18 months. Like, they made one crucial mistake, Grandma Eleanor continued. They assumed I wouldn't compare notes with you directly. When you told me about your empty college fund, I realized everything they'd been telling me was lies. What do you want to do about this? Grandma Eleanor's jaw set with determination that reminded me of her late husband's war stories. I want justice. They stole from both of us, lied to my face repeatedly, and used my love for you to manipulate money out of me. That's not just theft, it's emotional abuse of an elderly person. Are you prepared for the legal consequences they'll face? Charleston. I may be old, but I'm not naive. Your parents chose to commit crimes against their own family members. They made their bed, and now they can lie in it. I won't enable their criminal behavior by protecting them from the consequences. That night, I sat in Jake's basement bedroom surrounded by evidence of my family's extensive criminal conspiracy. Patricia's bank documentation, David Rogers' legal analysis, Mrs. Henderson's scholarship applications, Mr. Bradley's employment offer, and now Grandma Eleanor's records of systematic elder fraud together. They painted a picture of betrayal, far worse than I'd initially understood. My family hadn't just stolen my college fund in a moment of desperation. They'd spent over a year systematically defrauding multiple family members, creating elaborate lies to justify their theft, and actively working to prevent their victims from discovering the truth. They'd treated their criminal conspiracy like a business complete with fake documentation and coordinated deception. But their victim strategy had a fatal flaw. They'd assumed I would remain isolated and powerless, accepting their abuse because fighting back seemed impossible. Instead, I'd found allies who valued justice over family loyalty, resources they didn't know existed, and evidence of crimes they thought they'd hidden successfully. Tomorrow, I would file criminal complaints that would shatter their comfortable world of lies and consequence-free theft. Tonight, I felt something I hadn't experienced since discovering my empty bank account, hope for my future, and confidence that justice would prevail. They'd taught me that family loyalty only matters when it flows both ways. Since they'd shown me none, They deserved none in return. And since they'd chosen to be criminals rather than family, they could face criminal consequences rather than family protection. The next morning, I walked into the Cleveland Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit with David Rogers by my side and boxes of evidence documenting my family's criminal conspiracy. Detective Maria Santos, a 20-year veteran of white-collar crime investigation, reviewed our materials with the methodical precision of someone who'd seen every type of family-based fraud imaginable. "This is one of the most thoroughly documented cases I've encountered," Detective Santos said after examining Patricia's bank footage, the forged withdrawal forms, and Grandma Eleanor's elder fraud evidence. "Your family didn't just commit crimes, they created a paper trail that makes prosecution inevitable." David Rogers nodded in agreement. The conspiracy charges alone carry significant prison time, but the elder fraud elevates this to federal jurisdiction. The FBI's Financial Crimes Task Force will want to review this case. "What happens next?" I asked. Detective Santos pulled out arrest warrant paperwork. "We'll coordinate with federal agents to execute simultaneous arrests this afternoon. Your parents and brother will be taken into custody, arraigned on criminal charges, and held pending bail hearings." The wheels of justice moved with surprising speed. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, I was sitting in David Rogers' office, watching local news coverage of my family's arrest on charges of bank fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and elder fraud. The reporters stood outside our suburban Cleveland home as police officers led my parents and Marcus away in handcuffs, their faces showing the shock of people who'd never expected to face consequences for their actions. Robert Thompson, age 54, Linda Thompson, age 51, and Marcus Thompson, age 28, are accused of systematically defrauding family members out of more than $60,000, the reporter announced. The victims include the defendant's own son and grandmother, who trusted the family with their life savings and educational funds. Watching my family's humiliation on television felt surreal. Part of me experienced deep satisfaction seeing them face justice, while another part grieved for the relationships we'd never be able to repair. They'd forced me to choose between enabling their criminal behavior or holding them accountable, and they'd made that choice easy by showing me no mercy when destroying my future. 3 days later, I sat in another courtroom as my family faced their bail hearing. They'd hired a defense attorney named Richard Walsh, who specialized in white-collar crimes, though the evidence against them was overwhelming. Mom sat stiffly in the defendant's chair, her usual composed demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. Dad slumped next to her, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. Marcus fidgeted nervously, finally understanding that his actions had serious consequences. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Kim, presented the evidence methodically. "Your Honor, the defendants planned and executed a sophisticated conspiracy to defraud multiple family members through forgery, identity theft, and elder abuse. The victims suffered combined losses exceeding $68,000. She displayed the bank security footage showing my family's coordinated theft. This wasn't a desperate act committed in a moment of crisis. The evidence shows months of planning fake documentation and systematic deception of elderly victims." Judge Patricia Reynolds reviewed the case files with evident displeasure. "The defendants are accused of betraying the trust of their own family members in pursuit of financial gain. The elder fraud charges are particularly concerning given the vulnerability of the elderly victim." Defense Attorney Walsh attempted to argue for reduced bail. "Your Honor, my clients are longtime Cleveland residents with deep community ties. They pose no flight risk and have cooperated fully with the investigation." "Cooperated fully," ADA Kim interjected. "The defendants only confessed after being confronted with overwhelming evidence of their crimes. They spent weeks lying to investigators and family members alike." Judge Reynolds set bail at $75,000 each for my parents and $50,000 for Marcus, amounts they couldn't afford without selling significant assets. The court finds that the defendants pose a continued risk to elderly family members and other potential victims. As they were led back to jail cells, Mom turned and stared at me with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. Her expression suggested she still couldn't comprehend that I'd chosen justice over family loyalty, that I'd held them accountable for crimes they'd expected me to forgive automatically. The legal proceedings moved forward with relentless efficiency. Grandma Eleanor proved to be a formidable witness, providing devastating testimony about my parents' elaborate deception and systematic theft of her retirement savings. Her detailed records and elderly victim status made the case particularly compelling to prosecutors and jurors alike. They told me Charleston needed emergency surgery after a car accident. She testified with quiet dignity. They even provided fake medical bills and doctor's statements. I gave them $6,000 immediately because I thought my grandson was suffering. When defense attorney Walsh suggested that elderly memory might be unreliable, Grandma Eleanor's response drew gasps from the courtroom gallery. "Young man, I may be 86 years old, but my mind is sharp enough to know when someone is lying to my face repeatedly to steal my money. Your clients are criminals who used my love for my grandson to fund their personal luxuries." The trial revealed details about my family's spending that made their betrayal even more painful. They'd used my college fund and Grandma Eleanor's money to purchase luxury items, vacation trips, and gifts for extended family members, while telling everyone they were supporting my education. Mom had bought a $3,000 designer purse collection. Dad had purchased a new motorcycle he'd hidden in Uncle Robert's garage. Marcus had spent his share on expensive restaurants, concert tickets, and gambling trips to Las Vegas that continued his pattern of irresponsible behavior. Meanwhile, I'd been working 30-hour weeks while maintaining excellent grades, believing my sacrifice was building toward a debt-free graduation that would launch my engineering career successfully. The contrast between my responsible behavior and their reckless spending felt like a knife twist of additional betrayal. As the evidence mounted, plea negotiations began in earnest. Ada Kim offered reduced sentences in exchange for full restitution and admissions of guilt, but she insisted on prison time to reflect the seriousness of their crimes and deterrent effect on other potential family fraudsters. David Rogers kept me informed of every development while pursuing parallel civil litigation to ensure maximum recovery of stolen funds. "The criminal restitution will be mandatory," he explained. "But civil damages can include interest penalties and punitive awards that exceed the original theft amounts." The combination of criminal and civil pressure proved effective. My parents were forced to sell their house to raise money for restitution and legal fees, while Marcus had to liquidate his car and personal possessions to contribute to the repayment fund. 8 months after filing the initial criminal complaint, I received a check for $73,400, representing full restitution plus interest and penalties. My family had each received prison sentences ranging from 18 months for Marcus to 3 years for my parents, though they'd served concurrent time for their conspiracy charges. But the most unexpected consequence came through a phone call from someone I'd never met. Eleanor Harrison was a wealthy widow whose own family had defrauded her several years earlier. She'd followed my case through news coverage and wanted to meet with me about an opportunity. "Your courage in holding your family accountable inspired me," she said over coffee at a downtown Cleveland hotel. "Too many people enable criminal behavior from relatives out of misguided loyalty. You chose justice over family pressure, and that takes real character." Mrs. Harrison had established a foundation to support young adults who'd been financially abused by family members. "I'd like to provide additional funding for your education and early career development. Consider it an investment in someone who's proven they won't compromise their principles under pressure." Her foundation grant provided another $25,000 toward my education and career launch money that would allow me to graduate debt-free and start my professional life with financial security I'd never imagined possible. Standing outside the courthouse after my family's sentencing hearing, I reflected on the journey from victimhood to justice. They taught me that some betrayals reveal people's true character and free you to build better relationships with trustworthy individuals. My biological family had proven themselves to be criminals willing to destroy my future for their personal gain. But my chosen family, Jake's parents, Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Bradley, Grandma Eleanor, Mrs. Harrison, and others had shown me what real loyalty looked like. They'd supported my fight for justice even when it was difficult, uncomfortable, or costly to themselves. Justice felt good, but building a new life surrounded by people who truly cared about my success felt even better. 2 years later, I stood on the graduation platform at Case Western Reserve University, wearing my cap and gown, looking out at an audience that included my real family, the people who'd chosen to support my dreams rather than destroy them. Jake's parents sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Mrs. Henderson had taken time off work to attend my ceremony, and Mr. Bradley occupied a seat of honor as both my employer and mentor. Most importantly, Grandma Eleanor sat front and center in her wheelchair, wearing her best dress and a smile that could light up the entire auditorium. At 88, she remained my strongest supporter and had become the grandmother figure I'd always needed. Charleston Thompson, graduating summa cum laude with a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering. The announcer called as I walked across the stage to receive my diploma. The applause from my chosen family felt like vindication for every difficult decision I'd made during the darkest period of my life. I'd fought for my education, held criminals accountable regardless of their relationship to me, and built a support network based on mutual respect rather than manipulation. My biological family had been released from prison 6 months earlier after serving their sentences. They'd moved to a small apartment in Akron, their house sold to pay restitution and legal fees. Marcus had found work in a warehouse and seemed to be learning responsibility for the first time in his adult life. Mom and Dad had aged considerably during their incarceration and appeared broken by the consequences of their choices. They'd attempted to contact me several times through letters and phone calls, seeking reconciliation and forgiveness. Each message followed the same pattern: claims they'd learned their lesson, promises they'd changed, and requests for family unity that ignored the magnitude of their betrayal. I'd chosen not to respond. Some relationships can't be repaired because they were built on false foundations from the beginning. My family's love had always been conditional on my compliance with their wishes and willingness to sacrifice my goals for their priorities. When I'd refused to be their victim, they'd shown me who they really were, underneath their pretense of caring. Bradley Engineering had thrived during my time there, and Mr. Bradley had kept his promise to support my career development. I'd been promoted twice since starting as an intern and now managed my own team of junior engineers, working on major construction projects throughout Ohio and Pennsylvania. You've exceeded every expectation, Mr. Bradley told me during my graduation party at the company office. Your technical skills are excellent, but your character and integrity set you apart in this field. Clients trust you because they know you'll always tell them the truth even when it's difficult. Sarah had stood by me throughout the legal battles and family upheaval, proving herself to be a partner worth keeping. We'd grown stronger as a couple by weathering genuine adversity together rather than just sharing good times. She'd graduated with her nursing degree and found work at Cleveland Clinic, building her own successful career alongside mine. You've taught me so much about courage, she said as we walked through the campus where we'd met 4 years earlier. Watching you fight for justice when everyone expected you to stay quiet showed me what real strength looks like. Mrs. Harrison's foundation had continued supporting my education and career, providing opportunities for professional development and leadership training that accelerated my growth in the engineering field. More importantly, her mentorship had taught me about using success to help others facing similar challenges. Trauma can either make you bitter or make you stronger, she'd told me during one of our regular coffee meetings. You chose strength, and now you have the opportunity to help others make the same choice. I'd begun volunteering with organizations that supported young adults facing family financial abuse, sharing my story, and providing practical guidance about legal remedies and support resources. Many people suffered in silence because they believed family loyalty required accepting any treatment, no matter how destructive. The most profound change had been in my relationship with Grandma Eleanor. She'd become not just a grandmother, but a true friend and advisor, whose wisdom guided many of my important decisions. Her recovery from the financial abuse had been complete, and she'd used the experience to become an advocate for other elderly victims. "You saved my life," she'd told me after the trial concluded. "Not just financially, but emotionally. You showed me that being old doesn't mean I have to accept being victimized by people who claim to love me." Her strength and resilience inspired me daily. At 88, she'd started over financially and emotionally, building new relationships based on honesty and mutual respect, rather than manipulation and guilt. If she could rebuild her life after such betrayal, anyone could. One evening, as I sat in my new apartment reviewing architectural plans for a major project, I received an unexpected visitor. Marcus stood at my door looking nervous and uncomfortable, his appearance much improved from his prison days. He'd lost weight, his clothes were clean and professional, and his expression showed genuine humility for the first time I could remember. "Charleston, I know I have no right to ask for your time," he began hesitantly, "but I need to say something that I should have said years ago." I considered closing the door, but decided to hear him out. We sat in my living room, the silence stretching uncomfortably as he gathered his courage. "What we did to you was unforgivable," he said finally. "I've spent 2 years in prison thinking about how we destroyed your trust and nearly ruined your future for our own selfish reasons. I can't undo that damage, but I need you to know that I understand how wrong we were." "Why are you telling me this now? Because you were right to turn us in?" Marcus continued, his voice breaking slightly. "If you hadn't held us accountable, I would have continued making the same destructive choices for the rest of my life. Prison was the wake-up call I needed to understand that my actions have consequences for other people." I studied my brother's face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation. Instead, I saw genuine remorse and the exhaustion that comes from confronting your own failures honestly. "I don't expect forgiveness," he added quickly. "I just wanted you to know that your strength saved me from myself even though I didn't deserve it. You chose to do the right thing when everyone expected you to protect us from our crimes." "What do you want from me, Marcus?" "Nothing," he said, standing to leave. "I just wanted you to know that you made the right choice, and I'm grateful you were strong enough to hold us accountable when we wouldn't hold ourselves accountable." After he left, I sat quietly reflecting on his words. Forgiveness wasn't something I was ready to offer, and reconciliation seemed impossible given the scope of their betrayal. But seeing genuine remorse and actual behavioral change suggested that consequences had accomplished what family loyalty never could: real accountability and growth. That night, I called Grandma Eleanor to share the conversation with Marcus. Her response captured the wisdom that had guided me through the darkest period of my life. "Real love sometimes requires tough choices," she said. "You loved your family enough to stop enabling their destructive behavior, even when it was painful and difficult. That takes more courage than protecting them from consequences." As I prepared for bed that night, I reflected on the journey from victimhood to triumph. My family had taught me several crucial lessons, though not the ones they'd intended. I'd learned that family loyalty only has meaning when it flows both ways. People who demand unconditional support while providing none in return aren't family. They're emotional parasites using guilt and obligation to exploit your good nature. I discovered that some relationships are built on false foundations of control and manipulation, rather than genuine love and respect. When those relationships are tested by adversity, they crumble, because they were never authentic to begin with. Most importantly, I'd understood that fighting for justice, even against people you're supposed to love unconditionally, opens doors to authentic relationships with trustworthy individuals who truly want your success and happiness. My biological family had stolen my money, but they'd inadvertently given me something more valuable: the knowledge of my own strength, and the wisdom to distinguish between real love and manipulative guilt. They'd forced me to choose between enabling their criminal behavior and standing up for myself, then been shocked when I chose self-respect over family dysfunction. The people who'd supported my fight for justice, Patricia Williams, David Rogers, Mrs. Henderson, Mr. Bradley Grandma, Eleanor, Sarah Jake's family, Mrs. Harrison, and many others, had shown me what real family loyalty looked like. They'd stood by me when it was difficult, supported my decisions when they were costly, and celebrated my success because they genuinely wanted my happiness. Building a life surrounded by people who truly care about your well-being is worth any temporary pain caused by cutting off relationships with people who only pretend to care while actively undermining your success. Justice had prevailed, education had been completed, and a successful career was thriving. But the greatest victory was learning to value myself enough to demand respectful treatment from everyone in my life, regardless of their relationship to me or their expectations of unconditional tolerance. Some betrayals reveal people's true character and free you to find genuine relationships with individuals who actually deserve your loyalty. My family had taught me that lesson through their criminal behavior, though I doubted they'd intended to. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you exactly who they really are underneath their pretense of caring. My family had given me that gift, and I'd used it to build something infinitely better than what I'd lost. Real family members support each other's dreams. Everyone else is just sharing your last name. Now, I want to ask you something that really matters. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and standing up for yourself? How did you find the courage to do what was right, even when everyone expected you to stay quiet? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's facing a similar situation. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming betrayal and finding your strength, and share this with anyone who needs to hear that they deserve better treatment from the people who claim to love them. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, you always have the power to choose justice over dysfunction, no matter who's involved. Until next time, keep fighting for the life you deserve.